Hello everybody, my name is Parker Hartzler, and I wanted to make this tutorial video for you all on Unreal Engine 5.4 on how to merge Ultra Dynamic Sky, a very well-known marketplace asset, with this plugin, VDB SVT Helper. I've chatted with the creator, Thibault, I believe that's how you pronounce that name, on Twitter, just making sure I'm doing my due diligence and getting the correct logic for this, merging these two assets and not leaving behind any bad code. And I'm very passionate to share this all with you, just because I think it's very powerful to use a procedural cloud volume like Ultra Dynamic Sky and inject VDBs into it to create a very dynamic cloudscape that has a very large flexibility for you. Unreal Engine only allows you to actually use one volumetric cloud actor at a time, so learning this kind of customization and being able to inject this, I think, is major. It's super key. The plugin's really flexible and super cool. It allows you to render out VDBs also as Niagara emitters if that's something you're interested in, and supports up to 21 animated VDBs in the same volumetric cloud actor at once. However, for our purposes, we're going to be using the more performance-friendly version that's designed for procedural volumes, so it has a maximum of 5, which, in my opinion, I can't fathom needing more than 5 custom VDBs inside of a skyscape, even in a cinematic setting. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into Unreal Engine 5.4 and get started. So I just have an empty scene here with a volumetric cloud actor and a directional light. And to make sure that you have the plugin installed, you're going to want to go to your marketplace content, and you're going to want to install to Engine 5.4. And then once it's installed, just in your project, come to Plugins and search SVT, enable it, and then restart the project. If you don't see it, you'll just need to come to Settings and go to Show Engine Content, or Show Plugin Content actually is the one it would be. And then this Plugins folder underneath Engine, you go all the way down to the bottom, SVT Helper Content, and here it is here. So underneath Blueprints and Masters, this is the one I was referring to with the 5 clouds that's designed for, merging. And we're going to drag it in, and here we see a ominous volumetric cube. So we're going to drag our custom VDB that I've made from Emergen. It's a 125 frame loop at about 4.8 gigabytes, and drag it in there, and there it is. Now, first things first is you'll notice a ton of noise, which is normal just because the volumetric cloud actor has a very low voxel default for real-time purposes. But I'll put in the description the console command that you can add to movie render queue, or just pop in to your console variables here that will increase the amount of voxels per pixel, essentially. It's very performance heavy though, so obviously be advised if you're using that in real time. If you click down here, play in editor, you'll see it immediately starts playing. But for purposes of a volumetric cloud, this is moving quite quickly, and the tricky thing is with Emergen is it actually doesn't allow you to create loops at really slow frame rates. The highest it can go is 90 hertz, and the higher you go, the slower and slower the smoke is that it spits out. So it's kind of difficult because you can only do about 90 hertz, 400 frames is like your limit, and after that you're kind of just tapped out. But with this plugin, the SVT helper, we can change our play rate back to 0.1 just like you can on heterogeneous volumes, but you'll see it's still at slideshow. Anything below 1 just is a total slideshow. But if we click subframe interpolation underneath advanced, look at that. It is beautiful. It is magically just slower and gorgeous and fantastic, and what is now 125 frames is 1250 frames, which is amazing because normally the recommendation is essentially to retime this in Houdini if you want something longer or slower, if it's a flipbook, After Effects, that sort of thing. But we don't even need to worry about that, which is amazing. But how does this work with Ultra Dynamic Sky? Well, if we drag it in, you'll see that we have our Ultra Dynamic Sky here. I'll turn off the spare directional light, but their volume is gone. And if I click it off and on for visibility, you'll see it shows up again. And I'm just going to make it bigger here by typing in 2 for the global scale there in kilometers and 0.1 for the density. But they're fighting for one another, right? Like I turn off Ultra Dynamic Sky, I turn it back on, back and forth, right, with the two of them. So how do we get them to stop fighting? And the tricky thing is that they're trying to occupy the volumetric cloud actor. Ultra Dynamic Sky already brings its own to the party, just like the SVT helper does this in its own blueprint. So we're going to need to make a blueprint without that, and find a way to source it to the ultra dynamic sky version of the volumetric cloud actors and its components. So the way we'll do that is in my content folders, I've created a spare folder here called blueprints. I'm just going to duplicate this guy out, name it underscore UDS, we'll call it merger, and put it in here, right? Any customizations we make to stuff in plugins folders, we should absolutely drag into our content folders. That way our client or whoever else is using it doesn't need to copy our engine folder in order to get all of our changes. So we're going to copy that over, and then the other thing we're going to need is the material here. So if I open this up, you see it has a parent material, m underscore volumetric clouds max, and it's the same one for the subframe material as well. They both use the same one. So we're going to grab that one here. We're going to duplicate it. I'm going to call it UDS merger, and I'm going to bring this into the materials folder in my content folder. Awesome. Okay, so I've duplicated those, and you can see the material here. It's pretty simple to look at, thankfully. Everything's kind of cramped in that material function, as most materials should be, that are nice and tidy. And we're also going to need the material from Ultra Dynamic Sky. So materials from Ultra Dynamic Sky. We're going to go to material instances, scroll to the very bottom, and here we have volumetric clouds default. These four here, 2L, 2LS, default, and default S, are the materials that Ultra Dynamic Sky sources to change the volumetric clouds. And you can see its parent material here is just called volumetric clouds. So we're going to open up that parent material, and you see we have a bunch of logic here from Ultra Dynamic Sky with a bunch of material parameter collections. So as we change things in the blueprint, it'll update these. But we want to take all this logic, copy it, all of it, Control C, and in our new merger, our duplicate material, we're going to paste it. So now that we've done that, oh whoopsie, this came along for the ride because it got snagged in the box. We're actually going to need to fix something right away. You'll notice that at the bottom there's an error. Material can only contain one volumetric advanced output node. Well, there's this here, and there's also the same thing here. Now we want to keep this one, right? Because this is all of the changes that we put into our Ultra Dynamic Sky blueprint. It will get reflected here. So we're actually just going to delete this one entirely and just leave that conservative density reroute node. And so now that we've done that, that's all good. And now we're going to have to do a couple things. One is if we want the color to actually be appropriate and be changed with the plugin, or I mean the blueprint, we're going to plug that into albedo. So that's done. I'll delete that just for cleanup. This ambient occlusion material parameter just goes straight into ambient occlusion, so that's easy enough. And then, so now what we're going to do, we'll do emissive last, but we're going to do these densities, these conservative densities. Now I know this does say to just drag it into the max here for your procedural clouds, but conservative density specifically behaves in a bit of a funny way, where if we do it with max in Ultra Dynamic Sky, it really thins out the clouds and kind of ruins their shape. So what we can do is instead add a lerp node here. And in the lerp node, we're going to take the conservative density from our VDBs, and we're going to plug that into B. And then we're going to take the conservative density from our UDS clouds, and we're going to take that, see how it goes in there. We're going to drag it all the way over here, plug it into A. And then the alpha for this is actually going to come from the final density of our VDBs. And consequently, we're actually going to take the extinction value, which is final density essentially, from UDS, and we're going to plug that appropriately into the max here. That one's fine. This one makes sense. And then lastly, of course, we're going to hook up this lerp all the way back here to the conservative density, so that it loops back around, and then there you have it. One additional thing in order to make sure that the color matches, if you want your VDBs that you put in the space to have like a sort of like gray or like a sort of darker, like more smoky color to them, you can stop right here and just take the emissive from your Ultra Dynamic Sky clouds, plug it in, boom, you're done. But if you want them to match perfectly, we're going to need to take how it has extinction here, right? How we plug that in down here. We're going to need to instead take the merged final density, just like we did for the alpha, and we're going to need to put that in all the way up here in our emissive. Now, you should probably make some reroute nodes, because, you know, most material artists would look at this and say it's a little messy, but this is just what we're doing just for simplicity's sake. So yeah, those are all the changes that we need to make to the material. So we'll save it out, and then we're going to take the master material, and we're going to source all of the material instances that are used in the VDB blueprints and in the ultra dynamic sky material instances. We're going to make them all source the same parent material, because it's both of them, right? It's all it's both of those plugins together combined in one material. So once it saves out here, there we go. I'm going to go to our volumetric cloud subframe and regular, and we're going to replace the parent material with, let's go to my folder there, with the appropriate one here. Just drag it down, boom, and same thing here, drag it in, and boom. All right, so now we need to get the material instances from Ultra Dynamic Sky again. So we'll go down to the very bottom, and then I was saying it's default S, default, let's drag them over, 2LS and 2L, which stands for two layer. Okay, so now you could probably just go and get the volumetric clouds and do a reference viewer and replace it with the reference viewer, but I'm paranoid, and I like doing it the manual way. So I'm just going to drag these in here one by one. There we go. And done. Okay, cool. So, and another thing that you'll probably want to do later is we'll have to turn on subframe interpolation manually, and I'll show you that in a second, but in my opinion, I don't think that's really that much of a big deal. You know, you're likely going to want to use subframe interpolation, and if you aren't, you aren't. You just leave it off, and then it's no big deal. But anyway, I'll get to that pie when I get to that. Oh, hold on. Ultra Dynamic Sky is behaving a little funny here. I think it's just got to finish loading all the shaders. Oh, and we obviously have some blueprint logic to do. That's why it's doing this weird thing. Okay, so now we need to fix the blueprint to add all of the logic to affect the incoming Ultra Dynamic Sky volumetric clouds. So we open up our blueprint, and I'll show you where we go. We go into the construction script here, and this section right here we're going to change. We're actually going to delete most of this. So first things first, I'm just going to hit tab and type get ultra dynamic sky. There it is there. Has its own function for calling it. And then we're going to pull this out, and we're going to type get complex. And that's the material instance dynamic that it uses for creating the volumetric clouds. The 2D clouds is different, obviously. We won't be using that because it's volumetric. We want to use that. And then we're going to take this, and we're going to type set MID. And at the very bottom here, use this one. There is one at the top as well, I believe, if you turn off context sensitive. But don't use that one. You want to use this one at the bottom here. Variables internal. It's important to not get caught up. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can do it. It's just, it's literally just the same thing, except you have to set the target manually yourself or whatever. So, but this one already magically points to it, and it knows. So we're just going to plug that in there. And then you're not going to believe it, but we actually pretty much delete just all of this stuff here. And we're going to also delete the volumetric cloud out of the blueprint as well. You'll see that disappears there. And then we can delete all of that there. And then this just plugs into that. And that should be all we need. So if I compile this, and I save it, and we move around here, turn off and on our ultra dynamic sky, right? And then let's also change the cloud coverage, and let's get the speed going higher, and do something like 4, yeah. And then now sometimes your VDB won't be showing up, and you just need to compile one more time on the blueprint, and I'm not seeing my VDB. I think... Oh, I know why. It's because that's not even... that's not my custom blueprint, is it? That's the old one. I'll delete it, drag in the custom one. Ah, there it is. And let's make it bigger. It's like, yeah, something like that. Get the SVT or the VDB in there, I mean. And hit compile. And come down here, maybe make it less dense with the clouds on VDB, or I mean on Ultra Dynamic Sky, sorry. And then density, let's increase that. Hey, there it is. There it is. Okay, cool. And hit play in editor. Perfect. And then play rate 0.1, subframe interpolation. And you'll notice subframe interpolation isn't working after we've checked it on, and that's because we deleted the logic for it to actually function here, and it's kind of imperative to do that just so that it doesn't trip up Ultra Dynamic Sky, but it's no big deal. We could actually just go into the instances for the volumetric clouds for Ultra Dynamic Sky, and we can enable it here just in the instance. So if I do that, you'll see, boom, I now immediately have that. So I'm just going to do that for each one of the 4 Ultra Dynamic Sky materials. And then lastly, I'm going to do another thing that's going to actually really add to the appearance of this. So I'm going to increase the cloud coverage again, just because it's pretty. And, oh, I'm going to need to compile that blueprint again. There we go. There we go. And so now it's there, it's perfect, it's lovely. I'm going to come up. Sorry, it's really noisy, I know, when you're like moving through the volume. So like notice how it's chopped off at the top. That's very likely going to happen to you. Something that you can do to mitigate or alleviate that is Ultra Dynamic Sky. Search for 2 layers and then click that on and just give it some time to compile these shaders, but it essentially like doubles the height of your volumetric cloud actor. And allows more space for that volume to exist, and also clouds above as well. So it's really just a win-win for additional detail. And I believe you can actually, like if you need to, you can actually expand that volume further. There's a certain area in the material section here. I'll have to look it up here. It's in. Where is it? I'm just doing this while we're looking at the 2 layers here. Switch, yeah, true. Is it in this material function? I'm just doing some snooping while we wait for those shaders. 2 layers, here it is. There's a divide. No, true, yeah. True is divide by 2. False is just nothing. So in theory, if you were to take this and divide by 4, I think it would go higher. I'm honestly not sure. This might be another video that I make just to see, you know, like how flexible we can make this or whatever. But you definitely can go in here and customize the altitude. Oh, and another feature as well that's just a part of Ultra Dynamic Sky is if you type bottom, there's bottom altitude, and that will lower the floor. That'll like control like the floor of where your clouds are. There we go. We've got all the 2 layers now, and I'll need to hit compile again here. There it is. Let's make it bigger. Actually, let's make it way bigger. Let's do 3.5. There it is, and let's make it denser. 0.7. There we go. Just so we can really see it. Beautiful. Okay, so. Right, so I was just saying the bottom altitude, you can see if I come down here and I go to Ultra Dynamic Sky bottom altitude, you can change this to be 0.3 and it lowers that 0.2, you know, and so on and so forth, or even 1, just to, or 2 or 3, and really like raise the ceiling up. But obviously this raises and raises your volume further and further away from where you are. So I'm going to leave it at about 0.5. I'm going to hit compile again. And then I'm also, another thing that you can do to sort of raise this as well is, oh goodness, so noisy, is you can come into, I believe it's called layer scale. Yeah, layer height scale. If you increase this, it does change the shape of the clouds in Ultra Dynamic Sky, so keep that in mind, but like 1.5, all of the clouds are now a little bit taller than they would be. And that does also expand the volume upwards a little bit too. So that's something to keep in mind. So like if I increase this guy again to like say 5 or something, there he is. He's just barely clipping the seal in there, doing his thing. But yeah, and just as an example, earlier I did mention, you know, like, hey, if you wanted to have this be a different color than Ultra Dynamic Sky, make sure that you don't hook up the final density to your emissive. So like if I plug this in as it was, and then if I hit save, you'll see in a moment that boom, there we go. See, our VDB is like this darker sort of color, this like smoky, this like, I don't know, it's like a volcano almost or something like that, right? Yeah, sorry, super noisy, again, moving through the volume, but when you render it out in Movie Render Queue, actually, I can show you what it would look like here. It's something like this. I don't think I had, I'm not sure if this one had subframe interpolation on. I think it is on. It's just not the greatest render. But yeah, if you pop in the console variables that I list in the description into Movie Render Queue, you can see that it removes a lot of the noise between the pixels. Obviously, you can still see some square stepping, but the further and further you pump those values down or up, you'll see better and better results. So yeah, I hope this was a really cool video for you all, and hope shed some light on a lot of really interesting ways that you can sort of decorate the sky with all sorts of pretty things and have ultra control over ultra dynamic sky. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you guys have a good one.